well.
What's that?
That Aerosmith album. I forget what that one was.
Don't say Permanent Vacation or Pump.
No, it's not Permanent Vacation
Both
or
of
Pump.
those still hold up really well.
No, it's the one where they kind of came back again after the 80s, like in the 90s.
The one with the cow on it, Get a Grip.
Yeah, Get a Grip, yeah.
That one it's got a couple good songs, but I think there's actually an article online somewhere about this that that 9 Lives is some people consider the last great album. And I think that's true. I think 9 Lives is much better than anything on Get a Grip. If you've heard 9 Lives, it's really good. But I love Permanent Vacation. I was actually listening to Permanent Vacation and Pump just like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
I still really enjoy both those albums. So to get back to my point, I want to start doing this too for the video. It's a cool thing if you actually watch the recording of the show, you get to hear all the BS stuff ahead of time and watch all the errors that we make. It's always fun. But
how many times do we restart this shit over and over and over again?
So to go back on what you were saying earlier about Van Halen and Pound Cake, that whole album, For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, is horrible. It's bad. I think that there's like, I feel like there's only so many songs about sex I can listen to when I just kind of get bored with it. You know, I'm like, all right, I get it. Let's move on. You know, and then they do eventually on that album, but unfortunately, it's then like Right Now and like Top of the World, which if I hear Right Now one more GD time, I remember how just you couldn't get away from that thing when it was on.
Like everybody was like, it was so amazing, like so topical, and it's like it sounds so cheesy now.
It does. So I do still like The Dream Is Over from that album, but that's about it.
Yeah.
I think for me the best Van Hagar album has got to be OU812. What do you think?
I don't know. I'm not a huge Van Halen. I was never really a big kind of either. I hesitate to call them hair metal, but I wasn't any kind of that kind of glam or kind of 80s rock guy. Yeah. I was not really into that kind of stuff. It was part of the pop culture, but I didn't own a lot of that stuff.
Were you just being moody and listening to The Cure back then? What was your thing?
Yeah, it was basically really my first album was Metallica's Ride the Lightning. That's the first
was
tape.
It really?
Yeah, it was the first tape that I had. Yeah.
I don't even want to tell you what mine is then.
Yeah, mine it was like my friend's cooler older brother was like, was like really into metal and stuff. So he gave us like Iron Maiden and all this kind of crap and punk albums. So that's kind of where I got into all that stuff.
Huey Lewis and the New Sports was the first tape I ever bought with my own money.
I think we've talked about this before.
I didn't get into punk until college. I had a buddy of mine, Terry, who was big into that stuff, Social Distortion, 7 Seconds, NoFX, all that stuff. Yeah. So I didn't get into any of that until college. I was still headlong into Foreigner and Pink Floyd and all that stuff. You really he opened up my ears, if you will.
If anybody's actually going to listen to this, Scalzo has framed some of his vinyl that he is very important albums, and there's some really good ones on there, like Bowie and stuff. He's also got, I think, Asia, and I think Huey Lewis and the News Sports is framed as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, you're not anymore. You're going back in time. Back in my old apartment, I had my 80s bathroom. So in the bathroom, I had all the 80s albums. It was George Michael's Faith. It was Asia. It was, what else did you say? Sports.
Sports? Wasn't Sports on there?
Sports. And then there was one more that I'm blanking on. I don't know. We're not going to do that here. I think I'm going to do Mixed Tiles. Have you seen Mixed Tiles?
No.
It's cool. It's an app you put on your phone. You choose a photo. You send it to them. Or you just select it on the app and you pay for it. And then they send you these little squares, and they have like that command strip stuff on the back, so you just stick it on the wall, pull it off, stick it on the wall, pull it off. Okay. And they're like they're not big, but I'm thinking about doing that for a bunch of that stuff instead of putting the frames up, because I also think about sucks with the framing the albums is that your albums no longer have their cases, they no longer have their sleeves. So
I hear you. Yeah. Is this for your office? Is this where this is gonna happen?
That's the plan.
Okay.
So let's check you on a tour of the office at some point. All right. That's it. So I have a headache this morning. It's starting to go away, but I had pound cake stuck in my head, which is just horrible.
Just why?
Listen, Pound Cake, Judgment Day, Spanked, Run Around, Pleasure Dome, In and Out, Man on a Mission. Those are all sex songs. And we get to The Dream Is Over, which they get political about. And then Right Now, which is their feel-good anthem, like Get Motivated. And then Top of the World, too, just the same thing. Just horrible. Horrible. And the next album isn't that good either. That's the Last Hagar one, right? It's the Balance.
Okay.
Balance has got like 2 or 3 listenable songs. Here's my question for you. I was listening to Van Halen the other day. That's just what sparked all of this. Does Van Halen suck?
Yeah, even in the David Lee Roth years, they're not that good. I mean, they're
a bar band that got
some good. Yeah, they are. They're basically a bunch of drunken fools who, make stupid songs. But I mean, they're not like this transcendent thing that people have attributed to them. I don't think they're ever going to be considered. They're dangerously close to being canonized, and I don't agree with it. But I mean, their early albums are pretty fun, but I wouldn't say they're great.
I think that first album is a rock and roll classic album. It's strong from start to finish. But there's I think a steep drop off after that.
Yeah.
And then I think they shift into a greatest hits group right after that, where all you need to do is pick up their greatest hits, I think, and you're okay.
Right.
All right. I just listened to some of that Roth. Maybe, I don't know if maybe it's just the Hagar stuff. I remember when I was younger, I used to think Van Hagar was a better band, but Van Halen was more fun.
Right.
I don't know if I feel that way anymore listening to the album. And a different kind of truth. The reunion album with Roth, that's not terribly good either. And they reused and they fixed up some old songs from back in the day as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. I only listened to it a couple times, so because I just didn't care for it. Maybe I need to give it another spin. Whatever. All right, I don't want to take up your whole weekend.
Talk about Van Halen at least.
Let's get rolling here.
You know what pisses me off?
What's that?
They took away the ability to sort your wish list by sale or by price. So how am I supposed to know if books that I want have dropped in price? I have to scroll through the whole damn thing.
That's BS.
It is BS.
All right.
Oh, that was too confusing. That's a lie.
Let's do our test. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Can you hear this?
Yes, I can.
This is our new orphanage.
Okay.
As big as a castle.
Oh, by the way, yep.
Orphanage?
Yeah. By the way, I have a very long stinger today. All right. Yeah, it's about as political as we get. So.
Okay.
All right. Here we go.
Here we go.
Chris Galzer here with
Matt Howell.
On this episode of The First Run, Matt and I are going to discuss Annabelle Creation. The Conjuring universe continues, Matt, and we have a second visit with that terrifying possessed doll. It's more of a we'll get into it. It's just a fascinating story. We're also going to tell you what our favorite 80s horrors film, but going back on the archives, Matt, I realized back in the day, on episode, I think it was 18, we actually discussed this with our former co-host, Chris Esposito. So we have been banned from bringing up those prior films. So consider this part 2.
Okay.
All right. So let's get into it, though. Let's hear a clip from Annabelle Creation.
This is our new orphanage. It's as big as a castle.
Feel free to use the house as you see fit. Mrs. Mullins and I stay down here. Your rooms are upstairs. Locked, and it stays that way.
Hello? You're the Mullins daughter, aren't you?
You help me?
What do you need?
Janice says she's seen your daughter.
My daughter has been dead for a very long time.
She was taken from us at an early age. We prayed to see our beloved girl again. The contact started small, but then it wanted permission to move into a doll so that it could be with us forever. We said yes.
So, Matt, if something asks you if it can move into a doll, you say no.
But if somebody asks you if you're a god, you say yes.
That's right. So, Matt, why don't you tell us, what is Annabelle creation about? Why don't you shake it out?
All right, so it's basically about the origin of the demon-possessed haunted doll Annabelle from the Conjuring series. Backstory, you know, I don't even think they bother with based on a true story on this thing, because this is obviously completely made up, because nobody knows where the real Annabelle came from.
I forgot that the Conjuring films are based on a true story.
Oh yeah.
Quotes.
Oh yeah. I mean, hell,
Right.
As a former Connecticut resident, I mean, you used to be able to go. The Warrens had their house, and they had all this stuff they got from their investigations. You could go look at it. You can actually go look at the Annabelle doll and to kind of creep yourself out a little bit. But you can't do that anymore.
Didn't mean to derail you, so continue. What is the story about sweet young Annabelle?
Yeah, it's essentially, so it's about a family whose daughter dies. The father is a doll maker. And then it flashes forward 12 years, I believe. And they've opened their house to a bunch of, as a foster home for a bunch of orphan girls with a Catholic orphanage. I think there's like 7 or 8 of them. And eventually, you know, the girls slowly each start to see something weird in the house, you know, visions and ghosts and stuff like that. And it just descends into madness from there.
Good times. Mm-hmm. So is this a worthy successor to the Conjuring universe, Matt? Are you happy to be part of this expansion of this series, and where do you kind of log this in with the rest of them? So far we've had Conjuring 2, the first Annabelle film, and now we're at Creation. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I haven't seen the first Annabelle film. I had absolutely no interest in seeing it. You know, and from what I understand, I didn't really miss out on much. I like the 2 Conjuring films. You know, I think the first one's better than the second one in a lot of ways. But you know what? I'll be honest with you. This is another film, kind of like that Ouija prequel that we saw, that is more entertaining than it has really any right to be. I mean, it's not breaking any new ground. It's not going to be a horror classic, but this is actually a pretty fun, you know, kind of tense, creepy, scary little horror movie. And you know what? That's about all you could hope for.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. I think it's exceptionally well done for this genre. We see some crap stuff, but I agree with you that the Ouija 2, this is kind of in that same vein. It does a really good job, I think, with the scares. Now, one thing I hate is when the stars make bad decisions or things that don't make logical sense that you wouldn't do, like standing in front of an open doorway into a dark hallway and shooting a ball into it just to see if maybe something's out there. You know, there's certain things like that. And there's also a weird conversation between 2 of our young stars. In fact, one of them, you know, was in Ouija 2. I don't know if you noticed it was.
I was wondering where I recognized her from. I guess that's where it was from.
Yeah. So this time she's not the possessed one, thankfully. So good for her. It's Lulu Wilson. But she has a conversation with the other girl, that is just it's just at an age level that you wouldn't have for kids at that age.
Right.
It just kind of pulled me out. I'm like, kids don't talk like that.
Nobody talks like that.
And if kids were actually in this situation, they'd be crying underneath their seats of their bed the entire film. So
Right.
I realized I kind of got to let that go, you know. But still, outside of that, I thought it was really well done. I think the cast is committed. You know, everybody does a good job. I was on the edge of my seat a lot of this. I think the issue I've noticed is that I'm sitting there, you know, I'm like biting down on my finger. I'm like all tense, waiting for all this stuff to happen. And when it does happen, my reaction now almost is that I laugh.
Yeah.
I'm like, so I get that jump, then I laugh. I'm like, good on you. You know, you got me. So congratulations, David Sandberg. You did a good job. So one thing that I struggle with this thing is the ending.
Yeah.
You haven't seen the first Annabelle film, and I wouldn't bother.
Right.
It's not good, I don't think. And they tie this film into that one, and logically it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Because if she's possessed by this demon, why wait 12 years? And then why bring in somebody else as part of this cult to do your dirty work? Logically, it just doesn't connect for me. Maybe I'm missing something. Shoot us an email at feedback@thefirstrun.com and explain to me why I've got this so wrong. They have a nice homage to the real doll near the end of the film as well.
Yeah.
Again, in air quotes, real doll, because it's actually a
it's real.
Raggedy Ann.
It is.
It's a Raggedy Ann doll, and it's not the doll that you see in the films. That's much creepier than a Raggedy Ann doll.
You know what? I just to digress, the real Annabelle is way creepier than the like intentionally creepy doll that they try and make. There's something about just the fact that it's a Raggedy Ann doll. It's way creepier. They should have just left it like that. But I digress. I'm sorry.
That's because it's got that innocence factor to it. You can't do the things with the Raggedy Ann doll that you can do with a doll that actually has eyes.
Right.
This one does.
Right.
You can't make me sit in the end. Spoiler alert, by the way, for your little teaser for a good 10 seconds as we slowly zoom into the doll just to have its eyes look at you at the last second as the screen goes black.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another post-credit scene involving the nun, because that's the next film to come out in the Conjuring universe. So after Conjuring 2, and then Annabelle Creation, Matt, are you excited for the nun?
Yeah, you know what? The nun was pretty creepy. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. They managed to pull this one off, you know, out of not so impressive beginnings with from what I understand, obviously from what I've heard. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I may end up going and seeing the nun. I mean, and you know what? This film, you know, it had some decent jump scares, but it also had some pretty effective creepy images. Like I thought a lot of the, you know, like the glowing eyes and the shadows and stuff like that kind of creeped me out. I thought that was a pretty effective image. So if they can pull off stuff like that, I'll go see it. It'll be a fun little horror movie.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, there's nothing I think really new or revolutionary about this. Right, we haven't broken any ground in horror, but this is just horror done really, really well.
Yeah.
You know, and just alone for that, I think it's worth checking out. Do you need to see it in the theater, Matt, or can you wait for it to come home? What's your opinion?
I think you can wait for this to come home. But I mean, if you like the idea of kind of, you know, going to see a horror movie like on a date or with your friends, and you want to see it in a darkened theater with a bunch of people, you know, that's a lot of fun. That's a lot of the pleasure of horror movies. So, you know what, go out and see it if you're really into that kind of thing. But for everybody else, you know, you can probably just wait to catch it when it comes out on DVD.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree, though, that like comedies, horror is improved by seeing it in a large audience.
Mm.
As long as everybody's on the same wavelength and we're all rowing in the same direction.
That's very true. Because if most of it's laughing and you want to be scared, then it really ruins the mood, you know?
Yes, it does, for sure. Any other thoughts, Matt, before we move on? You want to give me a grade for Annabelle as well?
Yeah, I'm going to give it a B-. I mean, I don't think it breaks any, you know, ground or anything like that, but it's a solid horror movie. And, you know, as fans of the genre and as, you know, we will talk about later, even being competent is a really big feat for a horror film. So good for you.
Yeah, I think that's the exact grade I would give it as well as B-. So there you go. Once again, Matt, a stark disagreement between the two hosts of the first one.
I know. We really need to get something. We really need to watch something that really divides us, because those are our best shows.
Mm-hmm.
You tell me I'm wrong.
It makes me
No
listening
terms.
and putting together the stuff for last night. Once I realized that we had already done this top 5, listening to us with Espo again too, he had that dynamic.
Right.
So it's too bad. We need to, I don't know, find a way to weasel him back. He's got that kid though. So
I know.
Ooh, I got a baby. I have responsibilities. Whatever. All right. Let's move on. Choose an email. feedback@thefirstrun.com. What'd you think about Annabelle Creation? Matt, coming up on Blu-ray and DVD this upcoming Tuesday, that's August 22nd. A film that I remember not really caring for when I first saw it, though I'm keen possibly to revisit it. I'm curious for your thoughts. Getting released on Blu-ray from Warner Archive is My Blue Heaven, starring Steve Martin and Rick Moranis.
Yeah.
Do you recall My Blue Heaven? Am I wrong about my initial impressions, or at least what I remember them to be?
What was your initial impression? You didn't
Underwhelming.
like it?
Underwhelming. Though it was like a big hit, right? People liked it.
Yeah, it was. It was a big hit. I remember watching it. It's a decent movie. I've heard the theory that it's like it's the comedy sequel to Goodfellas. Essentially,
well, I don't think it's so much a theory as it's just a different interpretation of it. It's the same guy. It's Sammy the Bull.
Oh, okay.
He's the same guy in Goodfellas as he is in that. It's just more like, what happened, I guess, after, but a comedy version.
Right. Yeah, I think from what I remember, since we're old, I can remember this. People were expecting this to be a lot wackier than it was, and I think it's not quite the laugh a minute thing that people were expecting. But I haven't seen it probably in 20 years, so yeah, I guess I'd have to revisit it again and see if it's with my age and its age, if it's held up at all, or if I have a different opinion of it.
All right. Well, it comes with a brand new remaster, as well as the original trailer. Criterion is giving us something on Blu-ray that was a surprise. They had lost the rights to this film, I don't know, 7 years ago? It's been a while. But they were releasing the Blu-ray version of Sid and Nancy, Alex Cox's story about Sid Vicious and his girlfriend, Nancy Spungen. It's a fantastic film, man, if you've ever seen Sid and Nancy. I've been hoping that they would get their rights back to this for a very long time, and they have. Includes an all-new 4K digital restoration, 2 audio commentaries, one from 1994, one from 2001, a 1987 documentary on the making of the film as well. So I'm just happy that they got this back and they're putting this out on Blu-ray. I think a fantastic performance by Gary Oldman. So if you haven't seen Sid and Nancy, now's your chance. I just wish it came out before the Barnes & Noble Criterion sale had ended. So
yeah, you're just gonna have to wait till next year.
Yeah, or just no. They usually have 2 years, so one in summer and one in December. And plus, Criterion themselves does their flash sale once or twice a year for 50% off. So, Ash vs. Evil Dead Season 2, I have not seen yet because I don't have stars, but I did buy the Blu-ray, so now I can pick this up. Best Buy, you get a steelbook, includes all the commentaries for each episode and a whole bunch of featurettes on the making of the film. Matt, you saw Season 2. Was it as strong as Season 1? I got to say, I was disappointed with Season 1 at the end, because I think it's one of those things where they found out they were going to get picked up for another season, so the thing kind of just the whole season pretty much ended up going nowhere.
Right.
For me.
Right. Yeah, I think as a whole, the first season is stronger than the second season. It's still really fun, but I'm starting to get the sense that they're not quite sure where they're going with all this. So that's a concern for a serialized show.
Interesting. All right. Well, I'll definitely be picking it up still. And like you said, because the fun factor is still there, and it's just great to have Ash and the crew all back and see them on the screen. Because basically, we've been saying for years, we want another sequel. Give us another sequel. Well, now you have like a 3-4 hour sequel once a year. So
and Lee Majors playing Ashley Williams' dad. Yeah, so it's pretty awesome.
There you go. And then the big release this week, Matt, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. If you get it from Best Buy, you get a steelbook. Target gives you a digital featurette called Meet the Ravers. And then finally, Walmart has their very own Rocket and Groot cover. Includes a making of featurette, a 4-part behind the scenes documentary, as well as visionary intro. James Gunn gives you a little intro to the film. There's the Guardians Inferno music video, which I think you can see online, which is pretty funny. A gag reel, 4 deleted scenes, and then audio commentary as well. So you're going to be picking up Guardians Volume 2? I know I'll be at some point.
Yeah, at some point. I definitely will get it. The completionist in me will need it, and I enjoyed it quite a bit.
As did I. All right, then, Matt. Your straight-to-DVD pick of the week is Treasure Hounds.
All right.
Moving into his late grandfather's house, a clever tween inherits the old man's dog named Skipper, played by Norm Macdonald. That's right, Matt. This dog can talk. The sassy pooch leads the kids and his friends to a priceless treasure hidden nearby. I just love the idea of Norm Macdonald as the talking dog. I just wish it would be like a rated R comedy instead of a kids movie. I think
this is probably contributing to, like, every time I see Norm Macdonald, it seems like he just wants to kill himself, or he just wants everything to end, and this is probably what is contributing to that, having to work with this kind of stuff.
That's entirely possible.
Yeah.
All right. So what should we be streaming this week, Matt?
All right. So I know we talk about Quentin Tarantino a lot, so I'm going to suggest Quentin Tarantino's one film where he did not write it, and that is Jackie Brown. It's available on Netflix. I've heard some bold statements on this lately, where a lot of people are starting to argue that this is his best film, that the fact that he works with the constraint. Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with it, but that him being forced to work with the constraints of someone else's script, someone else's story, like allows him to showcase the best parts of his filmmaking while reining in a lot of his excesses and weaknesses that people perceive. So I haven't seen Jackie Brown in a really long time, because I think when I saw it, I was only had 2 other films really made, and I was expecting more of the same, and it wasn't anything like Pulp Fiction or Reservoir Dogs or anything that he's made since, really. So it's really the outlier. So I really need to watch it again to see what it's like. But I was just big by the fact that I was reading somebody arguing that this is his best film. I had to bring it up to see if people agree.
Well, they're wrong. But I will tell you, I recently just watched the Kill Bill, The Whole Bloody Affair. And that is so good. I mean, I haven't watched Kill Bill in so long that I don't know if it's because it's so fresh in my mind, but I feel like that may be my favorite Tarantino film. The whole package. So
it is my favorite.
It is fantastic. I think I always lean back onto Pulp Fiction, but after watching Kill Bill again, I don't know. I think I got to stick with that. So all right, interesting. Shoot us an email, feedback@thefirstrun.com. What's your favorite QT film? I'm curious. All right, Matt, let's move on. Let's talk about them. The 5 favorite horror films from the 80s that, weren't part of the initial run that we did back in 2007, I think. It's been a long time.
Holy crap. Okay.
So let's hear a clip from something.
Do you know how I knew your name was Doc? You know what I'm talking about, don't you? I can remember when I was a little boy, my grandmother and I could hold conversations entirely without ever opening our mouths. She called it shining. And for a long time, I thought it was just the 2 of us that had the shine to us. Just like you probably thought you was the only one. But there are other folks, though mostly they don't know it or don't believe it. How long have you been able to do it? Why don't you want to talk about it?
I'm not supposed to.
Who said you ain't supposed to?
Tony.
Tony's just trying to help, man. That's a clip from The Shining. I chose that because it was actually, I think, the only film that made all 3 of our top 5s when we did this back in the day.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, when that list you sent me last night, first, I'd like to point out that my list is by far the best out of all 3 of us. But,
wait, yours wasn't actually. You did not have The Shining on your list. So I guess I did it more as an homage to Espo. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. But I just like how the fact that you and I, our two lists, The Thing, which we have waxed poetic about as maybe one of the greatest horror films of all time, many, many times on this show, and how we've taken it out of the running, didn't make it as number one on either of our lists.
Yeah, so just to refresh everybody's memory, Matt's number 5 was Nightmare on Elm Street, 4 Hellraiser, 3 Near Dark, 2 The Thing, and then 1 American Werewolf in London. My number 5 was Reanimator, 4 was The Shining, 3 The Beyond, 2 The Thing, and 1 Evil Dead. Now, I think at this point, Matt, I may flip those. I think that since time has passed, I'm at a point where I think that I may go with The Thing as my number 1. Would you want to adjust anything in your top 5?
Yeah, I would flip American Werewolf and The Thing as well.
See, good.
And I might even move Nightmare on Elm Street up too as well.
But still no Shining cracking that top 5, huh?
Yeah, I know it's like blasphemy, but it seems like it's like, okay, if horror is like, the pop art, it's like you're bringing in the Mona Lisa and kind of throwing it up against the rest of it. So it doesn't seem really fair, to be quite honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, all right. Espo, his top 5 was Friday the 13th. This is what I love. Friday the 13th, parts 1 through 8.
I know. And those movies are so bad. All of them are so universally bad. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Nightmare on Elm Street, parts 1 through 5. Number 3, The Shining. 2, Aliens. And we had quite a healthy discussion about the fact that Aliens is not a horror film. But he was terrified by it as a kid. And then his number 1 was Poltergeist. So what I'm going to do, I think, for this show is I'm going to try and edit out and just post the top 5 discussion so you can hear it. But I want to warn you that this is from, and I actually have the date right here, Matt. This was originally posted on May 9th, 2010. Okay? And the audio quality is not top shelf. See, we're using some poor equipment and some poor editing software back in the day. And when I would do this noise removal, it would slightly distort the audio. Not bad, but there's like just listen to it and you'll hear it. It's going to be like 5 to 10 minutes, but it's just interesting to hear, especially to hear Espo in all of his glory, and then just how mean I am to him. It's horrible. I'm a horrible person, is what I'm trying to say. You're just very sure of your convictions and your taste. That's all it is. Always. I always am. Although I'd also like to point out that I like how Espo's list has Nightmare on Elm Street 1 through 5, and it doesn't even have the best of those sequels in New Nightmare on there. That doesn't include that. This is because it's confined to the 80s. Okay, fair enough. I guess that's true. All right. So go ahead, start us off, Matt. Number 5, best 80s horror film, not the 5 you've already mentioned. Yeah, I know. So because this is a really tall order, I really wanted to go with films to me that really just embody the 80s, really lean into that whole 80ness of the genre. So my number 5 is an absolutely ridiculous post-apocalyptic teen horror thing, Night of the Comet, where essentially a comet flies over, turns everybody into zombies except a bunch of teenagers, and they have their run of the world while trying to avoid zombies and killer cannibals and stuff like that. It is absolutely ridiculous in every single way. It has every 80s cliche, and it is absolutely wonderful. If you really want to see really some cheesy 80s horror, that's the one for you. No, that's although there's so many to choose from. So many to choose from. That's very true. There certainly are. That's good. Now for my list, man, I also eschewed all of my honorable mentions. So I couldn't use any of those as well. It had to be 5 films that I had not brought up previously, which made this very difficult. But I'm going to start things off with The Exorcist Part 3. All right. Okay. This is actually directed by William Peter Blatty, the guy who wrote the original Exorcist film. And it is, I think, aged really well. I want to pick up the Scream Factory release because it has the director's cut version of the film. because I guess they went through and they kind of reordered a bunch. They just changed everything. George C. Scott, though, takes over as the Detective Kinnaman in another films from his perspective. But it is a deeply unsettling little film. It came just in the door. I think 1989, Matt, is when it came out. And I don't know. I always had a soft spot for it. I think it's really creepy and disturbing. So if you haven't seen The Exorcist Part 3, seriously, give it a chance. It's really good. And Shout Factory put out a really good release of it. So, and I think you can get it on iTunes for like $10, I think. It's at least you could for a while. So that's my number 5.
All right. So my number 4 is the only one of the original, I would say, Romero's Dead trilogy that is actually in the 80s, which is Day of the Dead. Now this one is very, I guess, controversial amongst the fans. It's basically takes place essentially in it's a locked room type of horror film. It's in a bunker. Humanity is basically extinct, and there's a few holdouts living in a base underneath the ground, and basically it's descending into chaos, and they're all slowly going crazy. Not a whole lot of zombies in this film, which I think is one of the main criticisms of it. Most of it is just taking place about how awful all these people are to each other.
Yeah.
But the final thing at the end, where the zombies do break into the base, it is a highlight or a high watermark for the gruesomeness of, I think, of all of Romero's films. And they had some really disturbing kind of zombie kills in that stuck with me for years and years after watching that when I saw it way younger than I should have. So this is my kind of sneaking in as best I can a Romero film into this. Nicely
done. Yeah, Dawn of the Dead was right outside my 5, so that's a good pick. My number 4 then is Inferno. Dario Argento's spiritual sequel to Suspiria. This time we have an American college student. She's in Rome, and her sister in New York are checking out, I guess, a bunch of killings, and they come back, and and everything kind of goes crazy. There's a coven of 2 witches that they have to combat, but it's got the same kind of feel to it as Suspiria. You know, the stark color and the gore. I've always really had a soft spot for Inferno. It's obviously not as good as Suspiria, but still, in the Argento canon, for me, it's right up there with Deep Red as well. So if you haven't seen Inferno, it's really good, and I think it's well worth your time, especially as a fan of Suspiria. Though honestly, if you're a fan of Suspiria, odds are you've probably seen Inferno. So, but still, and I don't know if you heard, they're touring Suspiria, Matt. They found like a director's cut version of it, so they're cleaned it up, and supposedly, I think is it Blue Underground? I can't remember now. One of those companies though is going to be re-releasing it on Blu-ray because it's not available on Blu-ray in the States. And but they've been working on it for so long. I guess there's some real issues with the print, so it's taken a while. But they're touring it now, and it's going to be in New York, I think, soon. And it's going to be in, I think, in Miami in February of next year. So I'm actually going to make a trip to go down there because I think it's the closest it's going to be.
Okay.
I'd love to see Suspiria on the big screen.
Yeah,
that would be fantastic.
Cool.
Imagine too, I think in some places, I think Draft House may be doing it with an orchestra, playing the score live. How cool would that be?
That is pretty cool.
So anyway, number 4, Inferno.
All right.
Not the Tom Hanks film.
I was about to say, I was getting a little worried there. All right, my number 3 is again 80s in all the best way possible, but at least in an 80s in a competent way. It has a lot of the good parts of the 80s. It's kind of a horror comedy. One of the few, I think, there's a handful of I hesitate to call this classic, but I'll say classic vampire films from the 80s. I'm talking about Fright Night, which had a surprisingly competent remake with Colin Farrell.
He is
relatively a few years ago.
In that.
Yeah, he is. It's really good. But this one is kind of got the comedic elements. It's basically about a vampire moves into a small town, and basically the kid next door who's all into horror and watching late night horror TV shows is convinced that he's a vampire and he is going to have to kill him to save the town. It's just a fun play on the vampire mythos. It's kind of a Rear Window meets vampire meets 80s comedy, teen comedy thing. So it's kind of fun.
I like that. Rear Window meets. I like that. That's a good analogy.
Yeah. So it's a good time. It's definitely an 80s film, but if you're into that kind of cheesy stuff, it's cheesy in all the best ways.
I haven't seen Fright Night in probably 20 years.
Wow.
I've been meaning to pick it up and watch it again for a long time, and I need to. I bet you I can get a copy at the library. But yeah, that's a good one. My number, where am I? 3. My number 3 is, I may get a little flack for this. Maybe I should just switch my 4 and 3, but I just enjoy this film, I think, a little more, and that's Fulci's City of the Living Dead. If you're not familiar with City of the Living Dead, Matt, this is where a priest kills himself, hangs himself, and then this act ends up bringing all this horrible, horrible stuff to this small town. It's famous because it has a couple really super gruesome deaths. One woman vomits up her insides, which is quite a thing to see. Another guy is independent of this, or maybe it's because of all the evil seeping into the town. This kid gets caught messing around with this guy's daughter, and the father snaps and basically takes a table saw to him. So if you like the Fulci gore stuff, City of the Living Dead delivers it in spades. It's one of my more favorite Fulcis. Of course, The Beyond being the best, but of course, The Beyond was on my original list, so it was disqualified. There's also, too, if you haven't seen House by the Cemetery, which is not terribly good, but it has one of the weirdest kids in any horror film. Not as bad as, oh crap, Matt, what's the one? The night one. I can't remember. Where they actually had the Burial Ground. Thank you, Matt. Where they actually had the kid played by a little person. So it's actually an adult playing the kid, and there's this weird scene with his mom. I don't want to spoil it for you, but if you feel like, you want to feel really dirty and creeped out, go ahead and watch Burial Ground and look for that scene. But yeah, so City of the Living Dead is my 3.
All right. So my last 2 here, I'm going to give you fair warning. These were all my honorable mentions. For the last, I didn't put myself on that restriction. So my number 2. There are very, very few competent werewolf movies out there because it's hard to make it look realistic. Now, obviously, I put still the gold standard, I think, of any werewolf movie, an American Werewolf in London, on the last list. But this one is one that kind of gets lumped into the rest of it. It's The Howling. It's about a serial killer werewolf and a reporter who goes looking for him. And it's basically, it stars Dee Wallace, who's on a bit of a run of cheesy 80s horror movies. Was in Cujo's, was in Critters, was the mom in E.T., which is probably her most famous role. But yeah, it's they go to this compound. They're basically all werewolves. It's kind of this constant creepy thing. And the transformation effects, they're actually not bad. But the werewolf effects have not aged well. Although you do get the benefit of werewolves having sex and changing at the end, which is ridiculous. And also Dee Wallace, when she turns into a werewolf at the end, spoiler alert, she looks like a pug, which makes no sense at all. But it's
well, there's different species of werewolf, man.
I guess she literally looks like a guinea pig. It doesn't. A pug may be too generous. It's really weird, but yeah.
I think too. I think if you think of a horror franchise, I struggle to think of one that had worse sequels than the Howling films.
Yeah.
They're really bad. Really bad. You know, this is a good werewolf movie. Didn't make the cut for me, though. Wolfen. You ever see Wolfen?
I did see Wolfen, yeah. That wasn't bad. Starring a young Edward James Olmos.
There you go. Mm-hmm. So my number 2, then, is, I think, out of my list, may have the best ending of any of these films. And I'm ashamed that I forgot it the first time, and that's Sleepaway Camp. You have your kind of B-movie schlock slasher horror film at camp. Somebody is going around killing everybody, and at the end you have the final reveal as to who our bad person is. And it's, I think, one of the more shocking moments in horror cinema. I think to this day, if you don't know what you're about to see, I think it is still it's effective as all hell. So it's got some great cheesy 80s in it. It's probably, out of my films, it's the most 80s. But I do love me some Sleepaway Camp. The sequels, diminishing returns as well. Not as bad as Howling, but still diminishing. They really amp up the cheese factor in the sequels, but that first one with that ending and that one sticks with you, man. So that's my number 2.
All right. So my number 1, this movie freaked me the hell out. This is a remake. This is The Blob, 1985. And I'll tell you why this freaks me out so much. So, you know, basically the story is, I think it's a meteor falls to Earth. It has basically a small kind of a giant single cell organism that just starts consuming everyone it comes into contact with, and keeps getting bigger and bigger and becomes this force that no one can stop kind of thing. But what scared me about it so much when I was really little seeing this, and it was 1985, is that it's incredibly gruesome. Like, all of the kills in this are really gross, and they really kind of put a lot of thought into the fact that this thing is basically jellied stomach acid, and so everybody is really disgustingly killed. And I think this is one of the first movies that I can remember where there are some little kid protagonists that you follow throughout the film, and one of them gets horribly eaten that no one can save, and it's a very extended scene. So as a very young 8-year-old or whatever watching this in, you know, 1987 or whatever it was when I actually got around to watching this, that was very something I had not seen before, and it had stuck with me for a really long time. So I'm going to give props to The Blob 1985 for just that.
Yeah, I remember when I first saw it, I thought it was just okay. And then I revisited it a little while ago. I bought the Twilight Time release of it. Actually, no, I think it was Twilight Time. It actually got a larger release because the Twilight Time release was so successful. So, I'm thinking of Christine in regards to the release thing. So I do have the Twilight Time Blob release on Blu-ray. And you're right, it's really good. And I'm not talking just the gore effects. I think just as a whole, I think it's really well done 80s horror. Would have been on my list. Unfortunately, again, honorable mention, so disqualified. But yeah, I think the Blob remake is really well done. Not as good as my number 1, though, Matt.
Okay, let's hear it.
Have you seen Dead and Buried from 1980?
I have not.
That's too bad, man. So Dead and Buried it's a cult film. It's basically, there's a small town, right, a small coastal town, and there's this really just horrible, gory murders being committed by the townspeople on these tourists. Except then the tourists, these people then start coming back to life. And there's this crazy kind of the medical doctor guy who has found a way to reanimate the corpses. But it's all mood and atmosphere, and it's got a great ending. If you haven't, I think it's one of the best horror films of the 80s. It's really aged really well. If you haven't seen Dead and Buried, Matt, I can't recommend it enough. It's just really, the problem is I don't want to spoil what happens, so it's hard for me to talk about, but it's really well done. And as I said, one of the best horror films of the 80s, Dead and Buried. If you haven't seen it, rent it today. You will not be disappointed.
Mm-hmm. Should we do some more decades? Did we do a 70s or a 90s?
I'll have to check that. I would assume so, but I don't know for sure. I can go through the archive like I did with this and see if that happens. Because 70s would be good. I think the 90s would be a real struggle.
It would be a real struggle.
No 70s. So
all right, yeah. That's a miss out. That's going to be some good films. That's going to be some all-time classics in there.
Yeah. And looks like the same for the 90s. So maybe something we can revisit.
All right.
So I wanted to ask you, Matt, too, about this. Are the aughts, would you consider the aughts to be the golden age of horror? There's a lot of great stuff out there. Now, granted, when I was looking at my list, I think that it may be the 80s. But I don't know, that could just be nostalgia kicking in.
Yeah.
But I think the aughts have been really good. I mean, you have The Descent, The Ring, 28 Days Later, Let the Right One In.
Yeah, those are pretty solid. And
a lot of the foreign stuff too, The Martyrs. Yeah. And would you consider Shaun of the Dead? Wolf Creek's pretty good. I think The Devil's Rejects is strong. Much better than House of a Thousand Corpses, that's for sure. I mean, I think part of it was we had a real influx of foreign horror Previously to that, all we ever really got here was Italian stuff in the 70s and 80s, and that died out quickly. Right. You had some Spanish stuff like The Tomb of the Blind Dead, which is great. I don't know. Where do you come down? What do you think? Or should we hold that conversation off if we're going to do a decade horror marathon? Maybe we should.
Yeah, we should hold that off. We should hold that off. Yeah. Although, I mean, to be quite honest with you, it's kind of like we're getting a renaissance here, because I mean, I think the 70s has probably got the most classic films. 80s has got some really good ones too, but they haven't aged as well. Even the ones in the 70s that are really good have aged or like timeless. 90s is just generally crap. I think most of it is not that great. But you're right. I think starting in the 2000s and continuing into the 2010s so far, we've gotten some really solid classic films that I think are going to be watched for a really long time.
Maybe that's a better way to put it, is it's a renaissance. That might be a better way. I like that. Well, we can get deeper into this if we're going to actually run with this as a marathon.
Let's do it.
All right. Next week's going to be a little weird because Matt's going to go away on vacay, right? So I'm going to I didn't get to see Detroit, which I wanted to last week. I will check out something and bring it to you. And then I'm also going to start a first-run focus run. Last time we did a first-run focus, we talked about Preacher. I'm going to do a first-run focus on James Bond films, and it's going to be a stat-tastic run. I'm going to talk about how successful he was. I'm going to talk about how many people he killed. I'm going to talk about how many lovers he took, which is a really sexist thing to say. I am going to talk about stuff. I'm still working out all the details. I'm going to go through the whole canon in celebration of the fact that it was my birthday last month. That's supposed to start it in July. But also that Daniel Craig is officially signed back on for one more film, Matt. He wants to go out in style. Are you happy about this? I know you're not a big Bond guy.
Sure. You know what? Sure. Yeah, I'm happy because you're happy, Chris. That's really what it boils down to.
I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. And then when Matt comes back, we're going to talk about Logan Lucky, which appears not to be trending well.
Really? All right.
Jay Duplass on Twitter posted that the early signs are not good, and Logan Lucky is supposed to be really good. Soderbergh is back. I can't wait to see this. Yeah. So hopefully people will get out there in the theaters. You better. It's going to be really good.
Yeah, you better.
All right, so that's a big show this week. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course at thefirstrun.com itself. Just do a search for us. You'll find us. Shoot us an email at feedback@thefirstrun. Matt, that's going to be the big show this week. Let's take an extended break, and we will see you all soon.
Bye.
Take care.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men, machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate. Only the unloved hate, the unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery, fight for liberty. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, a decent world, that will give men a chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age a security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Now let us fight to fulfill that promise. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, in the name of democracy, let us all unite!